Genius or control freak, master innovator or relentless perfectionist. Steve Jobs wasn't just a man, he was a movement. A barefoot college dropout who reshaped music, movies, communication, and the very way we interact with technology. This isn't just a biography. It's the story of a boy adopted at birth who built one of the most valuable companies on earth, was fired from it, came back, and changed the world forever. Steve Jobs was born on the 24th of February 1955 in San Francisco, California. His biological parents, a graduate student and a Syrian political science professor, were young and unsure. They made the heartbreaking decision to give their baby up for adoption. Enter Paul and Clara Jobs. An ordinary working-class couple, Paul was a machinist, the kind of man whose hands were always stained with engine grease. Clara was a bookkeeper, organized, steady, warm. They raised Steve in Mountain View, a quiet neighborhood surrounded by apricot orchards, soon to be transformed into what the world would call Silicon Valley. In the family garage, Paul Jobs taught Steve how to take apart and rebuild electronics. The air smelled of sawdust and metal. The clatter of tools echoed as father and son worked side by side. Those evenings sparked something in Steve, a fascination with how things worked and how they could be made better. But Steve wasn't the typical straight-A student. Teachers described him as brilliant but restless, curious yet easily bored. One teacher once said, Steve could solve problems in seconds, but he questioned everything. Rules didn't impress him. At 13, Jobs got a summer job at Hewlett-Packard. Picture him, a skinny teenager wandering through rows of humming computers, the smell of solder and ozone in the air. It was here that he met Steve Wozniak, a shy, brilliant engineer 5 years older. Wozniak, with his boyish grin and thick glasses, loved building things just for the fun of it. Jobs loved imagining how those things could change the world. The two Steves couldn't have been more different, but together, they would change history. After high school in 1972, Jobs enrolled at Reed College in Oregon, but tuition was expensive, and after 6 months, he dropped out. I didn't see the point, Jobs later said. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. He stayed on campus, though sleeping on friends' floors, collecting Coke bottles for 5 cents to buy food, eating free meals at the local Hare Krishna temple. And he audited classes that fascinated him, like calligraphy. The graceful curves of serif and sans serif letters captivated him. Years later, he'd say, if I hadn't taken that calligraphy class, the Mac would have never had beautiful typography. In 1974, restless and searching, Jobs traveled to India. Picture the scene: dusty roads, crowded temples, the smell of incense in the air. He shaved his head, wore robes, meditated in ashrams. He experimented with vegetarianism and absorbed Eastern philosophy. When he returned to California, he was different, calmer, but with the same burning ambition in his eyes. April 1976. In the Jobs family garage, surrounded by wood-paneled walls and a dusty workbench, Jobs, Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne founded Apple Computer. Their first product, the Apple I, was hand-built. A simple circuit board sold for $666.66. It didn't look like much, but it was the start of a revolution. A year later, Apple launched the Apple II, one of the first successful mass-produced personal computers. Suddenly, computers weren't just for hobbyists, they were for everyone. By the time Jobs was 25, Apple was a $2 billion company, and he was worth over $100 million. On the 24th of January 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh. The world saw the now famous 1984 Super Bowl ad Apple as the rebel fighting Big Brother. The Mac was the first computer with a friendly graphical interface. It smiled when you turned it on. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Jobs was brilliant but demanding, obsessed with perfection. He clashed constantly with CEO John Sculley and Apple's board. Then came the shock. In 1985, at just 30 years old, Jobs was forced out of the company he had created. It was devastating. he later said, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. After Apple, Jobs founded NXT computer machines with stunning design and advanced technology, but they were expensive and sold poorly. Meanwhile, in 1986, Jobs bought a small graphics studio from George Lucas for $10 million. He renamed it Pixar. Nearly a decade later, Pixar released Toy Story, the first fully computer-animated film. It was a blockbuster, changing the movie industry forever. Jobs went from tech entrepreneur to Hollywood mogul overnight. By the mid-1990s, Apple was dying. Its products were outdated, its vision lost. In 1996, in a twist of fate, Apple bought NXT for $429 million, bringing Steve Jobs back home. In 1997, he became Apple's interim CEO. What followed was one of the greatest comebacks in business history. 1998. The colorful iMac made computers fun again. 2001. The iPod put 1,000 songs in your pocket. 2003. The iTunes Store transformed the music industry. 2007. The iPhone combined phone, music player, and internet into one device. It changed everything. 2010. The iPad created a whole new category between phone and computer. Jobs didn't just sell products. He sold dreams. His famous "one more thing" moments at keynotes had audiences holding their breath until the last second. By 2011, Apple had become the world's most valuable company. But Steve Jobs was fighting a secret battle with pancreatic cancer. On the 5th of October, 2011, at the age of 56, Steve Jobs passed away. President Obama said, "The world has lost a visionary, but his legacy lives on." In every iPhone, every sleek Apple store, every elegant curve of an Apple product, you can see his obsession with design, simplicity, and excellence. As he told Stanford graduates in 2005, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." From a small garage in Los Altos to changing how the entire world communicates, Steve Jobs proved that passion, creativity, and courage can truly change the world. If his story inspired you, hit like, subscribe, and share, because next, we'll uncover the untold stories behind Apple's most legendary products.